Hey, Mike here. I just wanted to let you know that you can listen to Dark Poutine early and ad-free on Amazon Music, included with Prime. Oh, wow. Look at that. It is time for another episode of Dark Poutine. We are the Dark Poutiniest. This is Matthew Stockton over there, and I am Michael Brown.
You pointed at me when you said that.
I did.
We haven't recorded in a few weeks. Have you missed me like the deserts miss the rain?
Yes, I do know that. Anyway, yeah, let's get on with it. This is an interesting one, and at the end of the show, you pointed something out to me while we were sort of chatting that I was really surprised by, but we'll get to that.
Okay.
The views, information, and opinions expressed during the Dark Poutine podcast are solely those of the producer and do not necessarily represent those of Curious Cast, its affiliate Global News, nor its parent company, Chorus Entertainment.
Dark Poutine is not for the faint of heart or squeamish. Our content is often intense and some listeners may find it disturbing. We are not experts on the topics we present, nor are we journalists. We are ordinary Canadian schmucks chatting about crime and the dark side of history. Let's get to it. Put on your toque, grab yourself a double-double and a Nanaimo bar. It's time to scarf down some Dark Poutine.
You are responsible for obtaining and maintaining at your own cost all equipment needed to listen to Dark Poutine. Dark Poutine can be addictive. Side effects may include, but not be limited to, pausing and questioning the system, elevated heart rate, pondering humanity, odd looks from colleagues as you laugh out loud at work, family members not into true crime worrying about you. Positive side effects may include some perspectives and opinions that you disagree with, as well as some wokeness and empathy. If you don't think Dark Poutine is for you, consult your doctor immediately.
In Montreal, Quebec, on the evening of April 10th, 1734, a fire broke out in the home of Madame de Francheville on Rue Saint-Paul and quickly spread throughout the city. Raging for hours, it destroyed over 46 buildings, primarily residential homes, and the Hôtel-Dieu, a hospital that provided medical care to soldiers and people who were too poor to care for at home. There were rumors that Madame de Francheville's Portuguese-born black enslaved servant, Marie-Josèphe dite Angélique, had started the fire as an act of rebellion on learning she was to be sold and sent away from her lover, a white man named Claude Thibault. Angélique was arrested and subsequently tortured until she confessed to setting the fire. She was then convicted of arson and hanged on June 21st, 1734. The fire significantly impacted Montreal's development and led to the creation of new building codes and fire prevention measures. The event remains integral to Montreal's cultural and historical heritage and yet another dark spot on Canada's history. Some have called Angélique a heroine, others a scapegoat. Unfortunately, the truth of the matter is lost to time. This is Dark Poutine episode 264, Montreal is Burning, Angélique and the Fire of 1734. Before the arrival of Europeans in Montreal, the area was inhabited by indigenous peoples for thousands of years. The region was home to several indigenous nations, including the Ganayehega, Mohawk, Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, and Huron-Wendat peoples. These indigenous communities had established complex societies and cultural practices adapted to the local environment. They had their own languages, spiritual beliefs, and social structures, and relied on hunting, fishing, and agriculture for their subsistence. The arrival of Europeans in the 16th century had a significant impact on indigenous communities in the region. European diseases such as smallpox had a devastating effect on the indigenous populations, and European colonization led to the displacement and marginalization of indigenous peoples. Despite these challenges, Indigenous communities in and around Montreal have maintained their cultural heritage and traditions. Today, the city is home to several Indigenous communities whose lineage can be traced back for thousands of years. They continue to have a significant presence in the city and contribute to its cultural and economic life. In the 18th century, Montreal was a rapidly growing but small walled city of just over 2,000 with a relatively diverse population. The city's location at the St. Lawrence and Ottawa Rivers confluence made it a vital fur trade hub, attracting traders from France, England, and Indigenous communities across North America. The fur trade was the primary industry in the area and was a significant source of wealth for the city's merchants. Montreal was also an important center for religious and political activity. The city was a seat of the Governor-General of New France, and several important government buildings, including Château de Ramezay, were located in the city. In addition, the Catholic Church had a strong presence in Montreal, with several large churches and religious institutions in the city's center. Montreal in 1734 was a society that was divided along religious and ethnic lines. The French and English populations were roughly equal, with smaller communities of Indigenous peoples, enslaved Africans, and Jewish merchants. The Catholic Church strongly influenced daily life in the city. Despite the solid Christian beliefs practiced by most of the city's inhabitants, parts of early Montreal were built on the backs of enslaved peoples. Slavery in Canada in the early 1700s was present, but relatively limited in comparison to other European colonies in the Americas. Owning enslaved people was primarily confined to the French colonies of Quebec and Acadia and used principally to support the fur trade and agricultural industries. According to author Afua Cooper, a Jamaican-born Canadian historian, in her book The Hanging of Angélique, the history of black enslavement in Canada began with a young Madagascar boy brought to the country by an English pirate and a Quebec clerk. In 1628, David Kirke and his pirate crew attacked and captured the French colony in Quebec, bringing a 9-year-old African boy with them. Kirke sold the boy, whose original African name is unknown, to a Quebec clerk who later sold him to another clerk, Guillaume Couillard, a friend of Samuel de Champlain, and you'll recognize that name as one of the founders of the New World. By 1632, the Kirke family had left the colony and Quebec had returned to French control. The boy was baptized in 1633 and given the name Olivier Lejeune in honor of his godfather, Jesuit priest Paul Lejeune. Olivier lived in Quebec for the rest of his life and died there in 1654. Enslaved people in Canada during this period were primarily Indigenous and African people brought to Canada through the transatlantic slave trade. Many of these individuals were forced to work in the fur trade, where they were employed as laborers, hunters, and guides. Others were used to cultivate crops, such as tobacco and hemp, in the agricultural regions of Quebec. The treatment of enslaved people in Canada during this period varied, but conditions were generally harsh. Enslaved people were subject to physical punishment, sexual exploitation, and forced labor. They were also denied fundamental rights and freedoms and considered their owner's property.
Mike, I think potentially a lot of listeners our age or up will be surprised that Canada actually had slavery.
Right, because we were inundated with things about the Underground Railroad and how Canada should be proud of what we did to help escaping slaves from the United States, but we conveniently ignored the fact that we actually did have slavery here for several centuries.
Until about the 1830s.
Yeah.
It was just never taught. And Canada, the Canadians who did do the Underground Railroad should be proud.
Of course.
But this is a fact of the history of our country that somehow was left out for us. For I don't know if Millennial or Gen Z get taught it in school.
Right, they probably do.
But we didn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? So a lot of, I bet there's at least a few people listening going, I had no idea we actually had sanctioned slavery in Canada.
We approach this from our Generation X lens. So, we can't do it from that any other way.
No.
So, but we're learning. We're still learning.
We're down with the kids.
We're down. I just think of that Steve Buscemi meme with his, when he's dressed like a teenager with a skateboard over his shoulder and it's like, hello, fellow teenagers. Oh, dear. One of those enslaved people was Marie-Josèphe dite Angélique, who came to be called simply Angélique. As record keeping was sparse during Angélique's short life, especially regarding enslaved people, little is known about the young woman's life. Angélique's exact birth date is unknown. However, it is believed that she was born on the Portuguese possession of Madeira in 1705. According to author Afua Cooper, Angélique's journey across the Atlantic likely took her from Portugal to the Low Countries, Flanders or the Dutch Republic, and then to the English colonies in New England or New York before finally arriving in New France. By the time she arrived in Montreal in 1725 at the age of 20, she had already been sold at least twice and had lived several places on both sides of the Atlantic. It is unclear how she came to be enslaved or whether she was born into it. However, it is believed that she was sold to a Flemish man named Nicus Bloch while in Portugal. In approximately 1725, Angélique was purchased by François Poulain de Francheville, a prominent businessman in New France, who brought her to work in his home in Montreal for he and his wife, Thérèse de Cohen.
I'm a classical libertarian small L that has a lot of focus on individual freedom. Right?
Sure, yeah.
Like we've had a lot of discussions, right? Like I get my back up on lots of things.
Yeah, for sure.
So I cannot understand how people have ever felt the right to enslave other human beings.
Yeah.
Right? Like I think most people in the country right now probably agree with that, but I'm sure some disagree with it. Oddly, there's still human trafficking out there.
Mm-hmm.
But this to me is just the ultimate evil.
Yeah. Well, a lot of times because they were people of color or indigenous peoples, they were seen as other or less than for some reason.
I don't get it.
Yeah. Well,
that sounds stupid, but I don't. Like, how can people do this to each other?
That's a good question. They convince themselves somehow that it's the right thing to do.
Okay.
You can't be doing something that you think is the wrong thing to do. You just can't be doing that over and over again because that would indicate that you had a conscience that you were going against. And if you're doing this kind of thing, you have had to have justified it to yourself somehow satisfactorily.
Pretty deeply.
Yeah. François Poulain de Francheville was born on October 7th, 1692, was a merchant and a member of the Montreal bourgeois. He was an entrepreneur involved in the fur trade and the St. Maurice ironworks. He also served as a seigneur. Seigneurs were the individuals who had been granted a fief by the French crown, which included associated rights over persons and property. These individuals were typically nobles or merchants. The English equivalent would be baronet. Francheville's wife, Thérèse de Cohen, had been born in 1697 to a wealthy family of merchants and landowners. When François and Thérèse were married on November 27, 1718, it was in front of the governor of Ramezay and all the elite of Montreal. According to parish records, the couple had at least one child named Marie Angélique, baptized on October 3, 1719. However, a later census indicated no children in the home, so it's presumed that the little girl had passed away. When 24-year-old Marie-Josèphe dite Angélique came into the employ of the Francheville home, under Thérèse's supervision, she was responsible for the upkeep of a prosperous household, which involved performing various domestic tasks, such as cleaning, cooking, doing laundry, and running errands. Between 1731 and 1732, Angélique had children, fathered by another enslaved person named Jacques César, who belonged to the merchant Ignace Gamelin. Unfortunately, all of the children died at a young age. Eustache, baptized on January 11, 1731, passed away a month later on February 12th. In May of the following year, Angélique gave birth to twins, but the boy, Louis, died the next day, and the girl, Marie-Françoise, passed away 5 months later. It is unknown whether the relationship between Jacques César and Angélique was voluntary or enforced by their owners. The barbaric practice of breeding enslaved persons was considered a profitable business strategy, allowing enslavers to increase their workforce without purchasing additional slaves. In addition, enslaved women were often dehumanized and subjected to sexual violence and exploitation, and their children were viewed as property, livestock that could be sold or traded for profit. Regardless of whether or not the relationship between Jacques César and Angélique was forced, by 1733 it was done. The same year, Claude Thibault, a former French soldier, began his work as an indentured servant at the Francheville home. Thibault immediately caught Angélique's eye, and the two began to have a clandestine affair. Afua Cooper indicated that it was unclear whether Angélique was indeed in love with Thibault. However, he also presented her with practical opportunities that Jacques César could not provide. Thibault was a white Frenchman, which allowed him to pose as her slave master if they were to escape together. As a former soldier, Thibault possessed knowledge of the frontier terrain that would aid them in their escape and prevent them from getting lost in the woods. Sir Francheville fell gravely ill in November of that year and quickly died. Ownership of all his property was transferred to his wife. Francheville bequeathed to his widow a valuable property measuring 43 feet by 60 feet on Rue Saint-Paul in Montreal. The property included a 2-story stone house and was a significant asset. He also left her an irregularly shaped farm of around 10 by 16 arpents, I'm not entirely sure what those measurements are, in the parish of Saint-Michel, consisting of several buildings and grazing lands with 15 acres dedicated to cultivation. In addition to these assets, his wife inherited his interest in the St. Maurice ironworks, including his personal investments, the Seigneurie of St. Maurice, and a small annual income derived from using these lands as capital assets. The inheritance also included ownership of Francheville's slaves, including Angélique, and Claude Thibault's contract of indentured servitude. Perhaps seeing an opportunity in the days after Francheville's passing, Angélique asked the grieving widow Francheville for her freedom. The answer was a resounding no. Madame Francheville needed every asset available to handle the household's business. Thérèse, who'd been known to whip Angélique while her husband was alive, had not softened after his death. Quite the opposite. She was more demanding than ever on her housewoman. Angélique was no pushover. She resented Thérèse and began talking back to her mistress without caring about the repercussions. Angélique did all she could to undermine and make life miserable for Thérèse and the rest of the free white servants in the Francheville house. From Afua Cooper's The Hanging of Angélique, quote, Angélique went on a small reign of terror in the household. She talked back to her owner, threatened her with death by roasting, quarreled with the other servants in the house, threatened them too with burning, and made life so unbearable for her fellow servant Marie-Louise Poirier that she quit her job. Madame Francheville, seemingly unable to defend herself or the harassed servant, promised Poirier that she was going to sell Angélique in the spring, and then Poirier could come back to work for her. Slave woman and slave mistress declared psychological war on each other and bided their time. Madame Francheville had the upper hand, or so she believed. Claude Thibault was also making life unbearable for his employer. Like Angélique, he was disobedient and insolent, and his mistress could not control him either. End quote.
So when he did the quote about roasting, I was totally imagining a Comedy Central roast.
Oh, no.
Like, picture Angélique going, well, 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 look at you all dressed up in your finest silk gown. If you keep up like this, the church might mistake you for a Huguenot and excommunicate you faster than you can say poutine.
Oh, dear.
But, insolent and disobedient?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would have been too.
Sure.
Right?
It's hard to say how I would react in that situation. I mean, there have been times in my life where I've just kind of rolled over.
Yeah.
You know, for one reason or the other. Like I essentially gave my power to somebody else.
Yeah.
And I'm not happy that I ever did that, but it's what I did, what I thought was necessary to do at the time.
Right. And then this is a much more extreme version.
Oh my gosh, yes. Yeah. I'm not comparing my life to an enslaved person.
No, obviously. And it must have been hard being stuck in a position like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's kind of like you're taken to a alien planet.
Yep.
Where you have no control over anything.
Right.
What are you going to do?
Yeah. Right. Exactly. That's exactly what I was saying. Afterward, Thérèse began arrangements to sell the troublemaker Angélique to a slave trader. Angélique, aware of the harsh realities of the Atlantic slave trade, particularly the likelihood of her being sold to a sugar plantation in the Caribbean, pleaded with Thérèse not to sell her. Thérèse, however, persisted. Angélique had no choice but to attempt to run away, and she secretly began plotting her escape with Claude Thibault, whose indentured servitude contract was soon ending. As the new year, 1734, began, the tensions between Angélique and Thérèse increased. Fed up, Thérèse finally had a buyer for Angélique, selling her for 600 pounds of gunpowder to François-Étienne Cougonet, a Quebec government official and entrepreneur. On learning of the sale, Angélique finally changed her tune, telling Thérèse she would behave and begging her mistress not to sell her, but it was too late. Thérèse was more than ready to be rid of the young woman. Angélique's change of heart was short-lived, and angrier than ever, she threatened her mistress, saying she would burn down the house. Fearing for her safety in her own home, Thérèse Francheville called upon her niece, Marguerite de Cohen, to come and live with her. As the pending sale loomed, Madame Francheville claimed she was frightened of Angélique, who she believed was plotting to set fire to the house with her inside.
Well, boo-hoo.
Right.
What does she think's going to happen?
Yeah.
I think that goes to show sort of how ingrained in society this sort of slave owner relationship must have been, where she's suddenly surprised that she should feel endangered.
Right. On February 22nd, 1734, the house's servants made a shocking discovery. Angélique's bed was ablaze, and Thibault's blanket was engulfed in flames. 2 house guests and the quick-thinking house staff put out the fire before it could do any serious damage. After that, Angélique and Claude ran away, hoping to reach the English colonies and catch a ship to Portugal. The fire, some believed, was deliberately set by the pair to cover up their escape. However, they didn't make it far. Due to the harsh winter weather, the couple was forced to seek shelter after making it only 60 miles. Unfortunately, they were captured and brought back to Montreal. Claude was imprisoned for breaking his indentured contract, while Angélique was returned to Thérèse. Punishments for runaway slaves in the 1700s varied depending on the time and place. In some instances, enslaved people caught running away were subject to physical punishment, such as whipping or branding. If the runaway slave was caught multiple times, the penalty could be even more severe, including amputation or death. But Thérèse did not severely punish Angélique for running away, likely because she did not want to diminish her value in the slave markets. Thérèse did not want to lose money on damaged goods. Angélique constantly feared being sold and loudly voiced her frustrations and fears with other enslaved people, nearby servants, or anyone else within earshot. She continued to make public threats against Thérèse, which left an impression on the neighbors. More after a quick break.
Hey, it's Kaylee Cuoco for Priceline. Ready to go to your happy place for a happy price? Well, why didn't you say so? Just download the Priceline app right now and save up to 60% on hotels. So whether it's Cousin Kevin's Kazoo Concert in Kansas City, go Kevin, or Becky's Bachelorette Bash in Bermuda, you never have to miss a trip ever again. So download the Priceline app today. Your savings are waiting.
Go to your happy place for a happy price. Go to your happy price, Priceline.
If you're looking for a smoking gun, I can absolutely guarantee you will not find it.
In October 2001, a series of letters filled with a deadly powder called anthrax were dropped into the U.S. mail system. What started as an unprecedented case turned into an unsettling mystery. Who sent these deadly letters? And why? From Campside Media and Sony Music Entertainment, I'm Josh Dean, and this is Cover Up Season 4, The Anthrax Threat. Available now.
And we are back. Matthew, what are your thoughts on Angélique and the burning of Montreal thus far?
Well, I was thinking a little bit more about why slaves didn't revolt in Canada or any other country, like a total uprising, because there were a lot of people, right?
Right.
And I think it's easy for you and I to sit here going and think, hey, why didn't they do it?
Yeah.
And if you think about it a little bit more deeply, like the slave owners probably had lots of tactics around
psychological
repression and control and physical, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the slaves would have been denied access to any sort of education or materials and not able to congregate, to plan, probably.
Well, punishment usually happened for offenses like talking back or escape.
Right.
The punishments were usually doled out in front of all the other slaves on the property.
Right. So that psychological warfare.
Right. Like so, and for example, if you see somebody else getting their hands or foot cut off,
yeah,
you are probably less likely to react in a way that is going to get you into that kind of trouble.
And there's probably a level of hope.
Mm-hmm.
Hope of maybe someday I'll be freed, and if I misbehave, it will never happen.
Or
which is sick. Right. That's the sickest thing. Right.
Or on the other side, it's resignation.
Yeah.
This is the way it is, and there's nothing that I can do.
Yeah.
The day of the fire, April 10th, 1734, was unusually mild. The streets of Montreal were bustling with people making their way home after attending evening prayer. Thérèse de Francheville, owner of Angélique the slave, was among them. Meanwhile, 2 young girls played in the muddy street under the watchful eye of a sentry in front of Hôtel-Dieu. A young indigenous slave named Manon kept an eye on them while visiting with Angélique, who was waiting for her mistress to return. At 7 o'clock that evening, the sentry sounded the alarm. Fire! The hospital bell soon followed suit, ringing out through the city. A fire had erupted on the south side of Rue Saint-Paul and spread quickly. Despite the best efforts of law enforcement, the fire was too intense for the men to get close to it. The streets, already muddy from the thaw, soon became impassable. People sought refuge at Hôtel-Dieu, but soon the fire spread to the hospital, leaving many homeless and panicking. In less than 3 hours, the fire destroyed 45 houses, leveled the Hôtel-Dieu, and left hundreds of people without shelter. With the ashes still smoldering, the city's leading merchants wasted no time making their way to the registry on Rue Notre-Dame. Pierre Lestage was among them, recounting to the clerk his harrowing experience of the fire and staggering losses he had sustained. As the wealthy recorded their damages, they knew that registration was vital to protect themselves from potential lawsuits by their associates in France or elsewhere in the vast territory of Nouvelle-France. Even public employees had losses to declare, with the notary Gaudrin de Chevremont bemoaning the loss of accounts, invoices, and other vital documents. The king's prosecutor, François Fouché, also suffered setbacks in his lawsuit against a creditor due to the loss of important papers, and the king's treasurer, Béret de Essars, lamented the loss of funds used to finance the king's projects and expenses in the garrison city. Meanwhile, the poorest residents lost everything and had nothing to protect or declare. The highborn were distraught over the loss of their luxuries, including one lady whose daughters were left without dresses and unable to maintain their social status. Engineer Gaspard Joseph Chosegros de Léry meticulously assessed their losses and prepared a detailed list for the king, including the reconstruction costs for their hospital, chapel, and convent.
So I read the script this morning.
Yeah.
And wrote some notes.
Yep.
And was talking about, well, it was karma and the entire city deserved it. And
yeah.
If you build a society on the backs of slaves, and this was...
So you came at it from a judgy place.
Judgy. And then I was like, well, but maybe not everybody in the city was in agreement with slavery. And it's hard because my first visceral reaction was karma.
Yeah.
Like, good. I'm glad it happened.
Tough bananas.
Right.
Yeah, your daughter's dresses were destroyed. Tough bananas.
Yeah, or this whole city burnt down. Screw you. You deserved it because you had slaves.
Yeah.
Right? But then I'm like, well, maybe I should temper that because I can't just cast judgment on everyone that lived in Montreal back then.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Local criminals, of course, took advantage of all the confusion, looting homes or scavenging abandoned items from the streets. Even the smallest items, such as pins or shoe buckles, intact or not, were valuable, as any metal object could be traded, sold, or melted down for a profit. The civil authorities turned to the clergy to deliver a stern message from the pulpit, urging Montreal citizens to come forward with information about the guilty parties. Those found possessing stolen items would be held accountable, not just in the eyes of the law, but also in the eyes of God. Several individuals, mostly impoverished, were arrested and accused of the crime. Researchers familiar with the marginalized communities of Montreal will recognize some of the usual suspects for petty theft. The following morning, a rumor began to spread throughout the city that Angélique had started the fire in her mistress's attic with the help of her white lover, Claude Thibault. The news only fueled the anger and despair of the people whose homes were burned to cinders and seeking answers. With the weight of public rumor against her, Angélique was arrested in the Garden of the Paupers at the Hôtel-Dieu and thrown into the King's jail. Meanwhile, the other suspect, Claude Thibault, had fled and remained at large. He was never found. An edict by King Louis XV had banned the presence of lawyers in Nouvelle France, leaving Angélique to defend herself without any legal assistance. Angélique was brutally interrogated repeatedly to obtain her confession to the arson. She steadfastly maintained her innocence, claiming she was not responsible for the fire. But Marie dite Manon, an Amerindian slave, declared to have heard Angélique say she would have her mistress burn. Over the next 6 weeks, the legal proceedings against Angélique progressed, and she didn't have a chance.
Well, she wasn't even recognized as a human being.
Right?
So there'd be no chance at all, would there?
No. During the trial, Angélique was subjected to intense interrogation with over a dozen confrontations and 4 official interrogations. Despite the intimidating tactics employed by the court authorities, she remained steadfast in her claim of innocence. Over 24 witnesses were called, 23 of whom stated that they believed Angélique had set the fire because she told them she would do so at one point or another. The turning point in the trial came on May 27th when a 5-year-old girl named Amabel, who lived near Therese's house, testified that she had seen Angélique carrying burning coals into the attic just before the fire broke out. Amabel even pointed out the coal shovel Angélique had used. Angélique, defending herself, was incredulous and cried out, "My little Amabel, come here by me, and tell me who it is that told you to say this. I will give you a morsel of sugar." Despite the young age of the witness, the judge deemed her testimony valid enough to move Angélique's trial to the next, more serious phase. Angélique was interrogated twice more, this time in the criminal seat, a low bench that allowed her interrogators to tower over her. This was a mandatory step in every trial for a crime punishable by death. Despite these interrogations' extreme and intimidating nature, Angélique continued to protest her innocence. After weeks of grueling testimony and questioning, the judge delivered the verdict on June 4th. Angélique's fate was sealed. She was found guilty and sentenced to death. The judge, however, was not satisfied with simply condemning her to die. He wanted to extract more information before she met her end. He hoped subjecting her to torture would force her to name her supposed accomplices, if there were any. The judge wrote, "After having carefully examined the case made against the accused, I find that the said accused is sufficiently guilty and convicted of having started the fire in the house of widow Francheville, which caused the conflagration of part of the town. For punishment, I judge that she be condemned to make honorable amends and to have her hand cut off, and that she be thrown alive into the fire in a place in this town deemed most appropriate, after being subjected to torture, in order that she name her accomplices, and that the judgment of the one named Thibault be delayed until the said accused has suffered such interrogation." And remember, he was never caught. The severity of the sentence was somewhat lessened when the case was appealed to the Conseil Supérieur on 12 June, which changed the punishment slightly. She was to be transported in a garbage cart to the church, where she was to confess her guilt publicly. Afterward, she was to be tortured and hanged before her body was burned.
I think a somewhat lessened sentence is kind of dancing on the head of a pin there.
Right. So instead of like having your hand cut off and then being thrown alive into a fire, we're going to kill you first. That's pretty much the only...
Torture you and then kill you first.
Right, yeah. Exactly. The form of torture used on Angélique was called the boot, or alternatively, the Spanish boot. The boot was a method of torture used in the Middle Ages, particularly in Europe, to extract information or confessions from prisoners. The boot was made of iron or wood and had a narrow cavity inside where the victim's leg was inserted. The device was then tightened with screws or ropes, and wedges were driven between the device and the leg. The wedges were driven gradually one by one with increasing force until the bones were shattered and the flesh was crushed. The process was excruciatingly painful and could take hours or even days to complete. Boot torture was used as a form of punishment for crimes such as theft, treason, and heresy, as well as a means of extracting information or confessions from prisoners. It was also used to punish slaves who attempted to escape as a deterrent to others. Angélique's torture was carefully documented. Quote, "In the tight boot, the said accused stated that she knows no other person and that it was not her. A wedge was inserted, and she said, 'I want to die. It is I and no one else.' With the second strike, she stated that she preferred to die, that no one assisted her in setting the fire. With the third, she repeated the same. With the fourth, she asked to be hanged, that it was her alone. Following which, for the extraordinary, we had a second wedge inserted and struck. With the first strike, she said, 'Put me to death.' With the second strike, she said, 'It's me alone.' With the third, she said, 'Hang me, it's me.' And with the fourth, she said, 'It's me, with a grilling pan, and no one advised me to do it. It was a thought, an evil thought that came to me.' The accused was then unbound and made to sit. We interrogated her as to whether it was not true that she set the fire to the said house of Dame Francheville in concert with another person. She stated that no one aided or advised her, that it was her own doing. 'It is I, sirs. Put me to death. I have no accomplice.'" End quote.
Horrible.
Terrible. That torture would break legs, break bones.
But torture is completely unreliable as a means of getting information or truth.
Getting the truth. It will get you information because...
But it might be the wrong information.
Right. The person will say things.
I mean, it's been a known fact for years now. And I think, to me, I think torture is primarily used to confirm the torturer's bias in seeking revenge.
Sure.
More than it is. And it almost kind of gives a credibility to the brutality by going, see, she said she did it.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And I'm glad she held out and didn't try to pull in anyone with her, at least.
Yeah. So Thibault may have been out of the picture already, and it was something that she decided to do on her own. Or maybe he was involved and she actually protected him right up to the very end.
Who knows? Well,
he never admitted to it, and no one knows what happened to him.
Never heard from him again, did we?
Yeah. Angélique was hanged in Montreal on June 21st, 1734. The king's scribe wrote about the fulfillment of the sentence, translated from French. In the year 1734, on the 21st of June, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the present judgment was by me, the undersigned, read in the cell of the accused, and after the sacrament of confession was administered to her by the priest of the seminary of St. Sulpice, she was handed over to the executioner, who led her to the door of the parish church of this town, where she made honorable amends with the torch in her hand, after which the executioner took her to the unoccupied space before the burned house, where she was hanged and strangled, and then thrown into the fire. Her ashes were thrown to the winds in fulfillment of the sentence on this day and year, as indicated above. According to the entry about Angélique in the Canadian Encyclopedia, the burning of Montreal and the trial of Angélique shed light on the harsh realities of slavery in Canada that had persisted for over 2 centuries. Although there is a possibility that Angélique did not start the fire, she was an ideal target for the crime due to her status as a poor, foreign, enslaved black woman who held no rights within white society. Nevertheless, it is also possible that Angélique did start the fire. She had valid grievances against white society, having been forcibly taken from her homeland and stripped of her freedom and basic human rights. She had even attempted to escape from enslavement once before and was caught, and it is worth noting that arson also played a role in her previous escape attempt. Today, Marie-Josèphe Angélique is revered as a symbol of black resistance and freedom. Playwright Lorena Gale wrote the play Angélique based on transcripts from Angélique's trial, which was performed in 1995 and later published in 2000. In February of 2012, the public square across from Montreal City Hall was named Place de Marie-Josèphe Angélique in her honor. Slavery was gradually abolished in Canada through a series of laws and court decisions. In 1793, the Upper Canada Legislature passed the Anti-Slavery Act, which made it illegal to import slaves into the province of Quebec. In 1807, the British Parliament abolished the transatlantic slave trade, And in 1833, the British Empire abolished slavery throughout its colonies. However, slavery was not fully abolished in Canada until 1834, when the Slavery Abolition Act was passed by the British Parliament, which officially ended slavery in all British colonies and territories. However, the legacy of slavery and injustices faced by enslaved people continue to impact Canadian society today. So here's where we should talk about something that you pointed out to me that I was actually unaware of.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a little serendipitous that we're doing this episode when we are. It was on my radar to do for quite some time, but tell me about it.
When you sent me the script, I thought you sent me the script because of a recent fire in Montreal that killed 7 people.
Right.
And after the script, I started doing a bit of research and found out that most historians think that the house that was set on fire back then was near the corner of St. Paul and Saint Laurent in Old Montreal,
right,
which was just Montreal at the time. And this fire on the 17th of March was on that corner.
So on that exact same corner.
Yes.
All these years later.
Yeah.
That is so weird. Yeah. What a strange coincidence.
Have you seen the news about that?
I have seen the news. It was horrific.
Horrific. And, one of the victims made a 911 call saying she's in a room with no windows.
Yeah.
And I think the city's calling for an investigation, sure, a public hearing.
Sure.
Because they're not sure if there were fire alarms. They're not sure. It's raised lots of questions about the rental apps out there, because most of the people that died were in rental app apartments.
Okay.
And so now questions are being raised around the checks on the places that are being rented and all of these sorts of things. And did the landlords who own these places actually have proper fire codes?
Wow.
I mean, it was a horrible that many people don't often die in fires in Canada.
Yeah. Right? And I'll post some links to this story about the more recent fire in our show notes.
Yeah.
That's right. It's time for voicemails. You can leave us a message at 1-877-327-5786 or 1-877-DARK-PTN. We'd love to hear from you. Let's see who called us this week. All right, let's get on with voicemails. And our first one, I do believe, is from a longtime friend of the show, Great Big Pete. How about that? Look at this. Let's listen to what Great Big Pete has to say.
Hey friends, Great Big Pete here. Wait a minute. I can call you that, right? I didn't just make it weird, did I? Anywho, Mike and Matt, I'm calling about your spy episode. I'm also calling from in front of the plaque where the Gushenko residence is here in Ottawa. It's a lovely, cool day today. And there's tons of Cold War history in this town. Holy crap, is there ever a lot of it. Anyways, you talked in this episode about the distant early warning line, or the DEW line. Fun fact, my granddad actually worked as a flying officer during the Second World War, and he flew out of the Torbay, Newfoundland, and he was a radar operator on the Cansos and Catalina aircraft, keeping our country safe from the Nazi U-boat. Neat thing is, the details from that, all of his sorties and all of his missions, as far as I can tell, is actually still classified. Anyways, later on in his career, he was wing commander here in town, and he designed the DEW line radars and also the base plates that they sit on. So that's a little part of history that you just reminded me of. So thanks for all the good shows, and keep it up, and go shit in your hat, please. I'm sorry. And give Steve my love. Who is a good dog? Yes, you are. You are a good dog. Yes, you are, Stevie. Steve's a good dog.
So Great Big Pete is back again. I love when Great Big Pete calls in.
Great Big Pete has a great voice.
He really does. He's got the perfect voice for calling in and giving like little blurbs of information, and then saying nice things to your dog. When you were playing that, I just randomly Googled Great Big Pete.
Okay. And the first hit was Great Big Pete is a Canadian singer-songwriter who's pretty terrible at the best of times. He is also an unsolicited telephone interview enthusiast.
Oh, no.
Now, I don't know if this is saying Great Big Pete.
Where are you finding this? Where is
I
this?
just Googled it. It was the top hit when I Googled.
Wow.
So I just Googled. So I don't know if it's saying Great Big Pete. If it is saying Great Big Pete, I will listen to the music, and
Yes.
I'll tell you if it's terrible at the best of times or not. And if it is you doing unsolicited telephone interviews, we like your voicemails.
Yes, we do. we really do. We appreciate it.
So call back next week and tell us if you do music.
Yeah.
I want to know.
I'm interested now in finding out.
I want to know.
And I'm wondering if that review of Great Big Pete was written by Great Big Pete.
It sounds like Great Big Pete wrote it himself, which is fun. So I really want to know if you're the same Great Big Pete. If not, that's cool. We still love you.
Yeah.
But let us know.
Regardless.
Yes.
Let's listen to another voicemail. We've got 3 this week. So here's another.
Hey, dudes, what's crack-a-lackin'? Big T here from the province of sunny Alberta. I talked to you guys a couple of years ago when I was driving my combine through my wheat field. But, hey, long-time listener, it's good to catch up for you. But I was just wondering maybe if you play a couple or look into a couple cases up here in Alberta, mainly Edmonton, the Melissa Latane case and the Punky Gustafson case. That was back in the mid-'80s, but if you have a look at both of those, look forward to hearing them on your show. So have a great day and go take a crap in your cap. Peace.
There you go. Another great voicemail.
I want to know. So I used to sit in the combine with my grandpa.
Yeah.
And I think in the 70s, there are probably smaller combines.
Mm-hmm.
And in Alberta, I'm picturing him having a massive combine.
Yeah. Like Jeremy Clarkson sized from Clarkson's Farm. I know you don't like Jeremy Clarkson, so this is the only thing recently that I've seen.
That came up on a flight yesterday.
Oh.
I was sitting beside us talking.
Have you
about
seen
that
Clarkson's
show.
Farm?
Yeah.
It's actually quite good, and it humanizes Clarkson in a way that you might be pleased with. But anyway, you don't have to watch it.
But thank you for calling in. Mike, have you talked and
those cases are on my list to do.
Okay.
Punky Gustafson was a little girl who was murdered, so I kind of struggle. I'm not so familiar with the other one, but I have put it on my list. But I struggle with kids. Both Matthew and I struggle with talking about children being murdered. So, but at the same time, there are some fascinating facts around that case that do make it quite compelling.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Thank you for calling.
Yes, thank you.
And I'm not going to give you a job because you're farming and you're in a combine.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
And that's an important job.
That is an important job. All right. And we know Great Big Pete is a terrible singer.
Well, maybe.
Maybe.
We want to know.
Exactly.
And I don't think it's singing. I think it's just music.
Oh, music. Oh, okay. Well, here we go. Here's another voicemail.
I love your message. Hello, Mike and Matthew. I'm Stephanie calling from Thunder Bay in the province of Ontario, as you would say, Mike. I'm a long-time listener, first-time caller. I've been following your podcast from the very beginning. Your show is the highlight of my week, and in the summer, when on road trips, I'll listen to my favorite episodes to get me through the long drives back home to Ottawa. What makes your show so great is the sensitivity you show towards the victims and the victims' families, as well as your playful banter. Both of your voices are so calming, and I have been known to fall asleep listening to you. Thankfully, never while driving, though I can't say the same for my passengers. Thank you both for all that you do, and from the bottom of my heart, va chier dans ta tuque. Also, super curious what Matthew thinks I do for a living. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful day. Bye.
Okay, so there you go. Somebody wants to know what she does for a living.
I know exactly what she does.
What is it?
She lives in Thunder Bay.
Okay.
Have you seen the movie Stardust?
Yeah, I did, and I quite liked it.
Where they have the airship?
It's like Neil Gaiman, a Neil Gaiman story. Yeah.
Yeah. They have the airship.
Yep.
And they collect lightning.
Oh, so she's a lightning collector in Thunder Bay.
Yes.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah.
What a lovely thing to be.
Yeah, and if you haven't seen that movie, see it. It's one of my all-time favorites.
It is a great film.
Yeah.
It's fantasy.
Yep.
But it is one of those kind of, like, the story is so compelling. It's a must-watch.
Yeah. So, lightning collector.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
Very nice.
Appropriate place to be doing it.
Oh, 100% appropriate. That's it for this week's voicemails. Again, you can leave us one at 1-877-327-5786 or 1-877-DARK-PTN. We'd love to hear from you, even if it is just to say hi and to tell us to go shit in our hats. If you're stumped for what to chat with us about, a quick story is welcome. All righty, it is time for us to thank our patrons. And this week we have, first up, Kate Post. And Kate is from Los Angeles, California, home of the Los Angeles Angels and the great pitcher hitter, Shohei Ohtani. I've been watching a lot of baseball because I got Sportsnet.
Okay.
And Shohei Ohtani is fantastic. What a great baseball player. Anyway, Japanese guy. Great guy. Very cool. So, sorry to sort of side swipe
Do you
a
like
little.
baseball?
I haven't watched baseball in years, but I'm getting back into it.
Fun.
Yeah. I want to go to a Canadiens game with you here, Vancouver Canadiens at Nat Bailey Stadium, and maybe we can organize something where some listeners can come and hang out with us at a baseball game.
Nat Bailey, is that named after the guy that started
White Spot?
White Spot
Yes.
and Triple O's?
Yep. Same guy.
Okay.
So Kate Post is from Los Angeles. And what does Kate do there in Los Angeles, Matthew?
With a name like Post, I think she's a journalist.
Okay.
Yeah.
See, I think Los Angeles, when I think of Post, I think she's in post-production, perhaps an editor, a movie editor or something like that. But okay.
Let's split the difference.
Okay.
She's an editorial editor.
Okay. There you go. That's fun.
Yeah, so she's the last bastion of the free press.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of nonsense going on around the press. Like
Kate Post makes sure that there's balanced opinions and facts.
Right down the middle.
The type of journalists we want.
Yes. Thank you, Kate Post.
Balanced opinions, facts.
Facts. Not alternate facts, but actual facts.
Not factettes.
Factettes. Facts light. Anyway, we have a new prime minister, which is amazing. And she is from London, Ontario, Matthew, your old stomping grounds. And her name is Autumn Buckingham. Autumn Buckingham. What a great name.
Autumn Buckingham. I was in London, Ontario yesterday from when recording this episode.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So she's a prime minister.
She is, which I'm so grateful that someone came in at that level. That means a lot.
That's like a superstar level.
That is.
So, I mean, with a name like Buckingham,
yes,
I think she's beyond prime minister. She's queen.
She's royalty.
Yeah, royalty.
We're talking some dark poutine royalty here.
Well, you know, Autumn Buckingham, London, I think she's royalty.
So what if she's royalty? I guess she doesn't have a job because that's the job. But what does she do with her spare time? Does she have hobbies like corgis and hunting and fixing trucks like Queen Elizabeth II did? Or, you know, our new King Charles loves the environment and yelling at people around?
I think she is I think she supports the arts, shows like Dark Poutine.
Oh,
yeah.
Somebody has to do that.
So she's a true arts Patreon.
Excellent. Well, she is a patron of the arts if she's come and done this for us. So we appreciate that, Autumn. Thank you.
And I'm sitting here wondering where she lives. I was just there, so I'm like, I wonder where she lives.
I know where she lives because her address is
but
here.
we aren't gonna.
No,
we aren't gonna say
we
that.
We don't dox our listeners.
Well, I'll look later and I'll see if she lives close to my brother or my mom.
There you go.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Autumn.
Next we have Kirsten Davis, and Kirsten is from a place with the coolest name ever, Cool, California. Cool. Cool.
Is that a real place?
That is a real place. Cool.
Wow, cool,
Where
California.
are you from, man? I'm from cool, California. Listen to me trying to be like that's how somebody cool would talk. That is not.
Maybe in the 60s.
Maybe. I don't know. Anyway, so what does Kirsten Davis do in cool California?
Nothing.
Matthew?
She just chills out.
She's just chilling and
She's
cool.
way too cool for a job.
Too cool.
Too cool for school.
Oh, there you go. Does she have any hobbies? I always like to give somebody a little something. She's got to do something.
What does she do?
Yeah, for a hobby.
She writes messages in the sand where the waves get them. And so people around the world, because she lives near this beautiful beach in California, right?
Yeah.
So people around the world who have visited there, if they have a loved one die, they send her a message to the loved one, and she writes them during the lower tide just for them to be there for a minute, just like life itself.
It's so ephemeral.
And to be washed away.
Wow,
So
that's lovely.
that's what she does for a living.
Well, thank you, Kirsten. You're serving a great service to the people who really need it.
Yeah.
Well, that's really nice. That's a nice job.
I just made that up, and I actually think it's a beautiful job.
I think that's a job that should
just
be a real
literally
thing.
just came out of my mouth.
Right?
Wow.
Wow. I think maybe that is a job that I would do. I think our friend Art talks about like writing messages in the sand to himself, and yeah, he's a good egg. We're moving on to PayPal donut money donors, and we had one this week, and that her name is Joanna McLeod, and Joanna says, "Go take a poop in your toques," from Joanna McLeod in Barrie, Ontario.
Joanna.
We
know Joanna.
Do we?
Yeah, I think she's in the yard.
A Yumber Yarder.
Thank you, Joanna.
Yeah, so we're always happy when we have a Yumber Yarder. And when I think Barrie, Ontario...
What do you think when you think Barrie, Ontario?
Well, that's where my friend, not to bring things down...
but here I go.
Not to bring things down, but my friend Mike passed away in Barrie, Ontario. But his sister, if she still owns it... she owns a sports bar in Barrie, Ontario.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, called The Locker Room. The Locker Room in Barrie, Ontario on 201 Cundles Road East.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you go, and if Dana is still the owner of that bar, just tell her Mike Brown says hi, and she'll probably poo her pants. But, well, she was like my sister. You know, that's how close we were. I mean, Mike and I were close. I was close with her family, her mom and dad. So she's the only one left. Her mom's gone, her dad's gone, and her brother is gone. So just if you go to the sports bar, which is the Locker Room in Barrie, Ontario, tell Dana that Mike says hi. Mike Brown says hi.
So Joanna owns a dance studio.
Okay.
In Barrie. So
yep.
she's a dance teacher, and it's called the Cha-Cha Lounge.
The Cha-Cha Lounge?
Yeah.
Wow. The Cha-Cha Lounge. That sounds fun.
1, 2, cha-cha-cha. 1, 2, cha-cha-cha.
Well, someone's got to do it.
1, 2, cha-cha-cha.
I would like to learn to dance, but I don't know if I have the agility for it. But it might help to improve my agility, because that's kind of how dance works, isn't it? You know.
I would love to see you doing the flamenco with a skirt and whoosh.
Well, why can't I be the dude I guess I could be like top half the dude and then the bottom half the lady.
I'd just like to see you doing total lady side flamenco.
Sure.
I think you'd be good at it, actually.
I probably would have fun.
Have you ever worn heels?
I have.
And?
I look like a lumberjack stomping around. I'm not the most, I don't have the most feminine gait, for doing drag, but I have done it. I have done drag. Matthew's staring at me like, oh my God, here's something about Mike I didn't know.
Like a performance, or just you just?
I did it was a comedy skit in which I did drag.
Fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
So
long blonde wig.
And I have never...
Little tight black cocktail dress that highlighted the part that shouldn't be highlighted whilst in a cocktail dress.
And I've never done drag.
Well, I mean, you don't have to be gay to do drag. Anybody can do drag.
This is true.
Yeah.
Dame Edna.
Dame Edna. Was Dame Edna not homosexual?
No.
Oh, there you go.
Yep.
I just assumed.
No.
And you know what that does? Makes an ass out of you.
And me.
No. See, and you.
And you. So, thank you, Joanna. And keep doing that cha-cha-cha.
Yeah. Keep doing the cha-cha-cha. Thanks to all our patrons and Donut Money donors, past and present, for your generosity. It helps to keep the show going. You can become a patron of Dark Poutine at patreon.com/darkpoutine. For a one-time donation, you can send us donut money via PayPal using our email address, darkpoutinepodcast@gmail.com. If you don't already subscribe to the show, it would mean a lot if you did. You can easily find Dark Poutine on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows. If you haven't gotten yours yet, my book, Murder, Madness, and Mayhem, is available to order via a link on the Dark Poutine website. And speaking of darkpoutine.com, please check it out for show notes and other cool stuff. We'd appreciate it if you took the time to give Dark Poutine a like or a follow on Facebook and Instagram. Most importantly, thank you for listening, and tell your friends about us. Word of mouth is a powerful thing. And that is it for Dark Poutine. So until next time, don't forget to be a good egg and not a bad apple. Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Hi, it's Shauna, and I might be a bad parent because my kids think French fries are vegetables.
Hey, it's Ryan, and I might be a bad parent because I went out for wings when my wife was in the hospital after giving birth.
Johnny here. I might be a bad parent because in my house, the tooth fairy gives pocket change.
But we're not alone. Len emailed us and said his 6-year-old daughter's Tarzan moment going from love seat to lazy boy by curtains made him more proud than any dance recital.
And Andy left his 2-year-old at the rink.
All right, guys, I'm sure we're not alone. Like Andy's kid.
For stories and confessions like this, make sure you check out our podcast.
It's called Bad Parents, and it's available wherever you get your podcasts.
I left a glove at the rink.